So I think I understand now that we're using the original Chord project's embeddings as a placeholder right now, and starting from that as a jumping off point. Um, but before today, I guess I was trying to start all the way from like point zero, where we will pull in data, make our own embeddings, and then go
Mhm.
from there. So I've been running myself in circles, unfortunately, but
You're
better
not
place
the only
now.
one. Yes, this is like you're not the only one. Like literally, Alex told me about that. Like, oh, it turns out in Task Skies we never used Sky Space or anything. We just simply used those embeddings that were provided with Core 19. And
Okay.
to me, that closed a huge gap in my understanding because I'm like, what are those embeddings like? First of all, I don't know anybody using them, and then there
Yeah.
are no description in Core 19 itself. Well, maybe there is, but like it slipped my mind when I was kind of going through like FAQs for Core 19, etc. And now, like I'm like, oh, so it's Spectre embeddings because before it I saw what Alan AI were doing, and I was always wondering like why they don't use their own models on top of the data to provide to all of us. But now it makes sense. They provided Spectre, then we get Sky Spacey model, and I actually don't know whether anybody like is using them in the first place. I just know that Brandon first did that pipeline, and kind of like everybody was excited, like, oh, this is exactly what we need. I'm like, okay, we need to, run it. Then afterwards, we had the whole team for like a month or something working on those Sky Spacey model. The question is why,
Okay.
but I think like right now we're in a really perfect spot to actually, you know, like to untangle all whatever we have this. Like we're starting to see this chord and like streamline the process. We we have Spectre embeddings and we essentially have some idea how to utilize it for face, right, engine.
Yeah.
Now, we in addition to that, we have Sky Space embeddings as well. Maybe we could use them as well and compare the two, etc. So
Yeah.
there is interesting area for R&D. But if not, right, I mean, team literature review. This is our product, right? So we should kind of cut down on R&D department a little bit over here, right? And just get this momentum. Like let's deliver this. And
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
the way I see it, like we're in a good spot in terms of from this step zero to step one. We're kind of like, oh, wait a second. So we have Spectre embeddings, and they're done the same way that we did Sky Spacing models. It's the same thing. Like instead of running Sky Spacing models, the same containers I was running, I could probably just take the code and use Spectre. So we could reproduce that result. So, okay, we're at the spot of this stage two. So stage one of pre-processing, like embeddings are there. Stage two is this face engine, etc., rehashing what TaskTiles did before, etc. And now essentially this area we need to kind of productionize the code a little bit, right? So currently we're at the state of having Python notebooks that they're runnable on Google Colab, and
Yeah.
now we have like Alex and I we just had a conversation with Manuel, and the backstory I don't know like Matan, are you familiar with Manuel or not? So Manuel joined CoronaWhy early on, and he was one of the co-leads for Team Tasgeo. And those guys were software engineering first. And they started with a really nice structured repo. Everything was ready to go for continuous integration and all of this good stuff. And they had a lot of members. But then since they immediately start using all of these best practices of, oh guys, here is how you use GitHub repo, pull requests everywhere, yada yada yada. So the code review process. Eventually, what happened is there were like a dozen of pull requests a day from contributors, and those contributors just learn about GitHub and pull requests. So there was a lot of hand-holding process of kind of like, oh guys, like we can't merge your pull request, not because your code is bad. Nobody cares about the quality of code at that stage. It's about kind of building, merging the code base. It was all about like the coding, like the simply the link, like when you start using continuous integration, you rely on linters to highlight like, oh, the styling of your code is wrong or something is the structure of this and that is wrong. So they simply were not passing the simple tests
Okay.
for submission. And
Yeah.
the whole process bogged down so badly. I'm like, what is going on? Like I thought when you have software engineering projects in line, like everything's supposed to work. So I learned the hard way on the example of Manuel and Daniel at that time that you burn down quickly when you immediately start do everything right. So since then, everything I do within CoronaWhy is simple stuff. Okay, Google Colab, no problem. Let me get it. Let me kind of get essentially what you guys already did to have like a Python, so not the Python notebook document, but Python script. After that, I'm immediately jumping like, here, like forget about Python packages, anything. Let me just run it like create, make a really manually create a container, and then I could use container everywhere I go. And usually I go to that stage, whatever, like using by any means necessary approach. And then after that, I was able, like for example, to run SkySpacey pipeline on a scale actually, even though it's kind of a challenging things to do. But now we don't need to do this like by any means necessary. Manual could help us in our journey to essentially go to like the right route, create a Python package for the pipeline, etc., etc., and we'll see how it goes. So right now he will take a look at what like Alex pushed to the repo, and let us see what Manuel's proposals would be in terms of, guys, we need to structure it this way and that way, and then we'll kind of tag along that
Yeah.
process.
Okay.
So Matan, whatever you did, also please just push to the repo so Manuel can take a look at it. Again, his goal is not to look at the quality of code or whatever imposter syndrome type of things like we all have at the back of our minds. The goal is just to simply like to structure the process a little bit. And now the way I see it, like what benefit I would like to see is just simply for like to keep the momentum that you guys got like first week of this process, because I remember there was like really huge push to this, but then there was like this slowdown because partially this circling around that, wait a second, why do we have spacey model like nobody's using them? Oh, wait a second, there are spectre models, we need to use them, but why do we have, like all of this like the moment when we put it like into our like Notion document and it's like stage one everything, we just make a note. Oh, wait a second. Looks like nobody's using Skyspace. By the way, I need to do that. Just kind of like, okay, looks like nobody's using them. But, oh no, hold on a second. Skyspace model, Mike Honey is using them because I delivered them to them. Like the one that I did, like was this containers. I know that I needed to put it like on a bucket for my honey to take them and use somewhere. But again, I don't know how he using them specifically, right?
I don't know. I feel like I was probably in a better place when I first jumped on board with you guys, because I think as soon as I mean the Notion documentation was great. It, the Anton that you put together, step 1, 2, 3, 4. So but then I started following the links and I saw Mike Honey's notebooks on Kaggle, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna piece all of this together, untangle everything, and then I think I just made it. I just blew everything up a little bit more, but it brought me back here, which is good.
Yeah.
So
So
it,
my honey, and I was actually surprised. Like this is where the Notion shines because when like I what I did was like like stage one, like that document. Then Alex contributed a lot for essentially stage two. I mean, I filled up stage one, Alex filled up stage two. Then Mike Honey kind of saw, I mean, it was all happened at the same time. Then Mike Honey filled out stage three, and this is where I personally discovered that for literature review, our demo, Mike Honey uses data all over the place, and it's all outside of CoronaWhy.
yeah.
So what Matan you did is essentially like the same thing. I was kind of like shocked, like what's going on, right? So this is where the untangling piece should come into play as well. So
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
what I told Matan, I said kind of let's not worry about Mike Honey's stuff right
yes.
now. Um, like let's focus on the pre-processing pipelines that we have,
Mhm.
which I didn't know about Fast Core 19 until today. So
Well,
I
simply
guess
like, forget about FastCore 19. FastCore 19, it was like the backstory is this: we had expiring AWS credits that
uh,
were like literally like they were like budget to burn, and I'm like, okay, and we like there was still this process of version v39 or something, and my Kanye was constantly bothering it, and I'm like, okay, screw this, I'll do it like the hard way. So I simply jump into place, and I'm like, okay, I could take the largest AWS instance out there because I was able to run the pipeline on my local machine. It just takes all of my RAM. I was able to run like two containers of those, like in two projects in parallel. So like the expected time was like 2 weeks or something to process the whole Core 19, and I'm like, oh my God, this is disaster. So I like at that time, Lukash already did like incremental pieces for the pipeline, etc. So you don't need to like recompute everything from scratch. But in reality, we only had version v12 or something that was prior the changes. So we never had, we had v19 version, but it was still a small portion of this v39 whole data set at that point. So I'm like, okay, let me do something quickly in a couple of like, I spent maybe like 2 or 3 days to do that. And I'm like, okay, I have a budget. Let me like simplify everything that Lucas and his team did and just like run it and whatever, like the process as much as possible. So my goal was just to have V39 and just to spice it a little bit, I wanted to do it as quickly as possible because I have literally 1 day to run it. So I'm like, okay, so I was like fighting for quota for the like the biggest instance on AWS, yada yada. But the story is like this: I was simply able to run like 21 container in parallel, occupied the whole RAM that that instance has, and it had like 384 gigabytes of RAM or something. So I was able like only to use again not 48 cores of that instance, but 20. But so it was kind of cool story. Actually, I need to make a blog like dev blog post for
yeah,
CoronaWhy in terms of because it's a cool story, but in reality, so you guys understand it, like there was literally like in a rush. I'm like, okay, we still have credits and we need to have that data. Let's just do something. And I did, and then afterwards I'm like, okay, I will get back to it when there will be like this use case. So
yeah,
the way I see it, like the same thing we will do essentially for phase pipeline, right? Like right now, for example, everything if you're able to run it on Google Colab for a small, not the whole data set, but let's say a portion of it, okay, it's good enough. After this, the manual process, I could replicate the same thing. It will take me like 2, maybe 3 days, and we could span it, run it on the whole data set. But
yeah,
like our goal is to build something more robust than this what I call Bobomatic approach. You don't need to rely on me here, right, or somebody else. Hence why I really like that manual re-engage with CoronaWhy, and I immediately it clicked. I'm like, wait a second. So I know that Alex and Matan are running around like first of all in circles regarding this like whatever we're doing there, but I know that the momentum of actually producing the code is there. And I'm like, wait a second, what if I get manual on top of this? Because I know manual definitely works in a small team environment when it's not like 30 people trying to contribute and everybody is learning the coding styles, etc. So manuals
mhm,
already learned the hard way. I learned the hard way as well. And I'm like, wait a second, this is perfect. Strike team happens over here, right? There are like essentially people that could, go and run it in collab and then also want to learn, not like to learn, but want to kind of go through the process of productionizing that code as well, right? But I know, for example, like Alex always talks about, oh, this needs testing, that needs testing, and I'm thinking like, wait a second, why Alex, as essentially a data scientist in terms of functions over here, thinks about testing, right? Like this is like this functionally this is like a different role should do this.
mm.
So
Well, if
what
we had more people.
Well, exactly. But I mean,
But
here is the difficult part. For example, for me, I'm like, at least I'm trying to wear only one hat at a time.
yeah.
That's why, like, when you look at me, Cole, that sometimes you can't make sense what. Sometimes I'm speaking about only one thing and another one. It's because I'm definitely kind of, what's the right word here? So I'm wearing only one hat at a time. One, like on one call, I will be thinking about only as a data scientist. I don't care about like your unit test code coverage whatsoever. Another one, I'm simply DevOps. I'm just thinking like, hey, what are guys are this doing? I don't really dive, deep into it. The only thing I care is like, can I run it in the containers, and then have was our guys who deal with Kubernetes. Again, I'm like we're really far from all of that at this point. But
Mm,
again, just kind of my point, like you need to understand clearly where you like each time. Oh, I'm just, data scientist over here. It's all R&D. Google Cloud is the best tool available out there. But the moment when you kind of think like, wait a second, but how I'm going to run it on the whole data set? You're not data scientist anymore. You're data engineer, and that's kind of different set of goals and processes in place in terms of how you approach problems, right? You don't care about like as a data engineer, you don't care about the code itself as well, because the moment when you counter, it's in a container and it runs, you don't care about your unit test. You only care about like is the container has proper tests,
mm,
etc. And can you deploy a new continuous integration pipeline and so on. That's why you can on this high, the same way how in our like this Notion pipeline we have stage 1, 4, right? Like stage 3 and 4, it's just Mike Honey. He has no idea how everything else before it was done. He just simply connects to those Kaggle kernels. Oh, I'm taking that output from that one. And like the moment the new version comes in, he kind of like, ah, man, I need to go and bother that person who run that pipeline. Again, pure. So Kaggle platform is a pure Bobomatic system, which is fine because it still works. So
mm,
we're at the stage of kind of like we're still Bobomatic, but we have the right people of at least some portion of it to kind of remove Bob from the equation. So like think about this. Like every time like when we have something like oh it's stage like this stage 2 specific like phase pipeline, okay, just think about that one. Because even there you can split it into data science, R&D. Do I want to use Spectre embeddings or Sky Space embeddings, whatever,
mm,
right? And then another piece is kind of like, oh, I need to push the code to GitHub repo. This is immediately like to me, it's all different roles. It's actually beneficial that it's all like you as one person have all of this. If you're in a big corporation, right, it's all different, not even people, departments, and they can't like miscommunication is huge, right? We're in a much like I think we're in a much better spot. I'm actually for the last like month or something, every time I'm discussing this type of thing like organizational with Arthur, I'm like, dude, if we were just like five guys, we'll already be delivering something, just simply because lean methodology works, but because we have like this, everything is huge within CoronaWhy, and we immediately like everybody by default start thinking about it. Oh, we'll just have like this, like 10 volunteers working on this. Like, but I mean, it's hard to work in a bigger teams, right? You
mm,
probably have experience in your professional lives when you kind of like, oh, like when you have a so I find like 5, 7 people, it's perfect. Everything more than 5, 7 people, first of all, I have a hard time keeping track of what everybody is doing, and then communication is always like painful.
No.
2, 3, it's perfect, especially if you have skill sets that like kind of overlap, amplify each other, etc. That's
mm,
where everything shines.
mm,
You can go
mm.
by Bezos' rule where you should not have a team larger than uh, what is it? Something like not larger than a like pie of pizza will feed. I think that's his rule. Something
Yes,
silly like that.
Oh
this
yeah.
is
Um,
actually a good,
so
good system.
all right. So I guess right now what we're doing is um, really what we're doing right now is we're just testing the phase matching, right? That's all that we're doing right now. Because
So
go ahead.
so right now, like I think while we wait for Manuel to evaluate things, I think that you and I, Matan, can continue working on like parsing out Christine's notebook, because that's what he's gonna need. Like at this point, we're almost to the point where we we can start parsing out the models. Okay.
Which is Christine's notebook?
So Christine's notebook is the Kaggle notebook. That a lot of the same functionality is in the TaskTiles repo on GitHub, but it's the patient descriptions notebook. Let's see. I'll send you a link.
Yeah, send that to me.
Yeah, but
because I'm just like confusing myself on what to pay attention to, right? So
right.
if I guess what I'd like to establish is that for now we're just going to rely on the embeddings that are already created by the original Chord Kaggle challenge, right? Just the latest iteration.
Yes and no. Okay, so here's the thing with the embeddings. The embeddings that AI2 created are document level embeddings. Okay, and so they're vectorizing the entire document. And what we're probably going to need, and what Anton has done, I believe, is sentence level embeddings. Is that right, Anton?
Yeah, so Sky Spacing models, they took the whole like full JSON, like full text JSONs, right? So and you have like all the way sentence sections, or like so the body had section. The way the JSON structure is, there's body, then within body you have sections. Every section, I don't know, like other sentences identified or not, but essentially they're like this, like chunks of text, right? And then what the Sky Spacey pipeline that we use, it essentially goes through all of them, and for all of the sections, it creates the embedding and produces this output JSON.
So are those section level embeddings then?
So, well, I mean, I think the thing is, as I said,
Is it creating one vector for each section and then just compiling them for all
I
the?
I think it's supposed to do it essentially sentence level, but then the section itself, it's kind of like a combination of them. And I think we use something like as a simple, just average them or whatever.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
so hold on. So we're comparing right now the AI2 with Spacies. That's what we're talking about.
So this,
So
Science
sorry. Go ahead,
Spacey,
Anton.
it's also models made by Allen Institute. So AI2 guys.
Um, all right. I don't know. I'm a little confused now.
So
So
that's okay, man. So I guess what my point is that we have different embeddings for different purposes, right? And so what you and I were working on the other day was were the document level embeddings, and what that allows us to do is just compare two documents, right?
yeah.
To say which ones are similar to whatever document we're presenting. So it's not like a typical search engine, right? But what we are going to have to do is build out that typical search engine functionality, and that was kind of already done with Elasticsearch, which would use the embeddings that Anton's talking about. So different embeddings for different purposes.
Okay. So is at some point one of these pipelines, I guess, extracting like core claims, and then that's where the sentence level embeddings come into place? I'm not really. I'm
I
not
think
under.
there was some functionality for that in a different group. Maybe the groups that are working on like fact checking. I think they were doing, or not fact checking, but contrary claims. There was a group working on that.
Yeah. I guess I'm just not
but it's
understanding
not
why
something.
we need sentence. It's like if we're trying to match document level similarity,
Mhm.
why? I mean, to get like a better
Yeah,
match, then we might want the sentence embeddings. But I'm just not understanding
yeah,
what we're talking about sentence embeddings right now in the context that we're talking about.
gotcha. So in my view, the document embeddings effort is just like a feature. It's not the main. It's not the main course. The main course is
Mm.
like a basically a Google style search for these documents. And so being able to look up, being able to type in a phrase
Hmm.
and it presenting back, here's an article that has a similar phrase or a
Okay,
similar sentence, right?
so
But the document doesn't let you do that. It compares just the entire document.
yeah.
It's a much larger scale,
Okay.
right?
I mean, so yeah. So I in my mind right now, we're just talking about different levels of granularity and
Yeah.
greater matching power, right? Um, okay,
Uh,
but I
yeah. The granularity, right? Uh-huh.
um, so I don't know, but I'm still fuzzy on like
Yeah.
where those two different levels of embeddings come into play. Or I guess really I'm confused where the sentence level embeddings come into play. Right, actually, right now they don't come into play, is what you're saying, but we're going to want to build that in.
Yeah. So maybe an application would be like, okay, so I want to search for comorbidities of COVID-19. Okay, so I type that into the search engine, and it uses the sentence level embeddings to find a bunch of articles that relate to that, right?
So is it like this? I'm
That
sorry
have
to interrupt.
information
I'm
about
just
comorbidities in it, and then from there, you're good. Go ahead.
sorry. What? So give me a sec. Just lost my train of thought quickly. So I think what all right, so we somebody goes into the tool, they type in whatever it is, then the engine is going to look for similar articles, and then within those articles we want to match um, the claims or the assertions or whatever is actually relevant within the article itself, right? um, does that make sense? So we got to
So
break
so
so first we got to break
so
down.
maybe more specifically,
Go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say maybe more specifically, like when you run that search, it's looking for sentences within documents that are
Right.
similar,
Okay.
just to maintain like a little bit of. I think you're saying that, uh,
Well,
right?
because I think ideally for the end user, like I mean, I think that's exactly what they're going to want. They're not going to want us to narrow down just the
Right.
articles that they should be looking at, but within each article, what's pertinent to them. Like we'll be able to like kind of
Right.
now when you
Right.
Google something and you click on the search result, Google right now has this like highlight feature where it brings you to the place in the web page that is relevant to your search. So that's what you're getting at. Okay. And so right
Mhm.
now, we're not worried about creating new embeddings for the articles. We're using what Cord has already created, and we just want to get phase working right now. Is that accurate?
So again, face is the document level embedding. That's kind of a feature. That's not the main course. That's
Okay.
that's just where Christine's stuff started.
Okay.
Um, so the main course, the main search functionality that you're describing is what we want to work on. Um, it's not going to use face probably because that's I don't know. I mean, I guess it could, right, Anton? Maybe. Um,
Is that part built
but
out
but
anywhere yet or
it
no?
will use the sentence embeddings. So I mean, I think our efforts were to start with Elasticsearch, right, Anton?
Well, I guess so. That was when you were discussing this, my question was immediately like, oh, wait a second, this is where Elasticsearch is getting used, because I know that we have it, and we have all of the people like pumping like this embedded into Elasticsearch, but I never kind of saw like where people actually use it and for what. So yeah, I guess uh, Elasticsearch is perfect for this, right? So we have a body of all of these papers, and now we have a query that essentially kind of like, okay, now we need to search all of the documents based on this one. So that search query also put into the same embedding space, and now you know you find the documents that are similar, and Elasticsearch is perfect for that.
What does
Mhm.
Christine's notebook do? How many different like I guess if you could break it down into high level sections.
Yeah. So it does two main things. One, um, it 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 finds documents that are similar to, in her case, seed articles that were curated that answered specific questions that Kaggle was interested in. So it finds similar articles. Okay, in that
Okay.
front. The second thing it does is it applies named entity recognition models to extract information from those articles, from those similar articles.
Got it.
So things
Okay.
like sample size, things like, yeah. Anyways,
It's pulling the metal. It's
so
pulling
it's a very
metadata.
small piece.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of creating metadata. Yeah, um,
Okay. Um,
or yeah, extracting, I guess, would be.
so I'm just writing. I'm just writing this down quickly.
Have
So
you guys looked
Yeah.
into TaskTies like as a repo, like the list of notebooks that were essentially used to create that huge kernel notebook?
um,
Maybe
Yeah,
that will
yeah.
make it
So
easier to identify the sections.
I think those will be helpful for the like once we're moving things from Notebook over to Pi files.
Mm,
But I think one thing that Christine did that was valuable is she aggregated them, right? And
mm,
so, like in that environment, like I know that everything in there works together, not just works individually like these Pi files do. So that was valuable, but it's yeah. I mean, I think it's just
Well,
whatever the preference is of whoever's
yeah,
working on it.
I just opened the repo that I sent in the Meet chat, and just like for me, when I like saw the train NAR pi, I kind of remember, oh, wait a second, I remember that looking into that document. So this is where actually like our previous conversation regarding this like name entity recognition, I mean like this embeddings and name entity recognition, they are right interconnected. Because if you want, let's say, search
Yeah,
about like time periods, right? The moment you detect it in your query, you essentially need, oh, wait a second, do we have the index of name entity recognition regarding like time extraction and things like that? So in a sense, this would explain the question that Matan was having
okay.
before, right? It's essentially like where like so do we start with like Spectre embeddings, document level, then why do we need, science space and stuff? And now in my head, like I'm kind of like going back to this good space. Is I'm like, wait a second, right? I remember like I'm recalling that. Wait a second, TaskTies has training pipelines because we were thinking about for our pre-processing adding not only
Yeah.
science spacing models but also our custom models as well. So this is where it all now finally to me from engineering perspective falls into one group. So for example, like if we
Mm,
have functionality all the way from the user experience people when they say, you know what, we need dedicated functionality to do search based on like time extraction. Then we build a model that extracts time data as TaskTies did, and then that model get deployed, I mean, getting used also within pre-processing pipeline as well. So in a sense, to kind of like in terms of, I have like really simple picture in my head, but I'm having hard time to describe it to you. So in terms of how the data, like the journey of a document from a Cord 19 all the way to how we visualize it into our literature review tool is very simple and straightforward, right? It goes into pre-processing pipeline, and we pre-cache all of this, whatever models we use, embeddings we use. They get stored in Elasticsearch, and then whatever we have system, whatever we built for the literature review tool itself, it just simply queries that pre-cached Elasticsearch with those entities. Hence why that search will actually kind of work, more or less fast. So you don't do this on the fly in terms of, you know, building embeddings and, searching everything.
Um, can we do this? Let me know if this makes sense to you guys.
Uh-huh.
So just as a place to have like just to be in a place where we're on solid ground, I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if we can just start by saying just start really with Christine's notebook and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the first thing that we're going to be pushing to GitHub is a way to find the similar articles and extract the metadata. So we'll just start there, and then once we have that, I feel like we can start branching off into the rest of this, eventual
Mm-hmm.
pipeline. And what I'd also like to do is get a graph going on like basically everything we've just talked about, because what's in
Mm-hmm.
Notion is good, but it's really high level, and I think there's a lot more nuance here that we've been talking about that we should record and then work off, in the near future. So that to me would like put me personally in like a much more organized starting point base. Does that make sense to you guys or no?
So who
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think
makes sense
some
to
of
me
this
as
is
well.
what Manuel's going to help us do as well, like build out exactly like the actionable items, so that
Yeah. So I'm saying like
we all
right
have
now, like
things that we're doing.
if Christine's notebook is doing a similarity search and then extracting metadata, all right, let's say we eventually get those scripts in GitHub. Then we can say, well, first point of order, I think, is just get the minimal viable product, right? So just exactly, I think, exactly the way it's, whatever algorithms are being used right now, just use those. Don't worry about performance yet.
Yeah.
Then we'll use the graph that we put together with the notes to start different iterations, different ways of finding a similarity. Because I know that, like, and I've already talked. There's like task contradictory claims. There's another way to do it. So, but I don't want to confuse myself, and I don't want to confuse other people. So again, to me, just getting like, and Alex has already done the similarity search. So I think, we use the result from Alex's pi file um, to those I think are the similarity metric. So we'll be able to find similar articles. Then we just need to extract the metadata, and then I feel like we have a base point to branch off from, right? Either whether we want to start from before that process by creating our own embeddings, or move forward with getting into the sentence level embeddings for the more granular comparison. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I feel like, to me, like this Christine's notebook with the
Yeah, I think
similarity
so.
metadata, like that's a centralized point where we can like have clarity in our brains and progress, I guess.
No, it definitely makes total sense from my perspective. Is again the pipeline itself. It's a pipeline, right? And then all of these sections, they are modules that you could swap out. The
Yeah.
moment when you see bottle, like from performance perspective, you see bottleneck, you change around, put a bigger pipe, right? Simply put in there. Or if you need some other type of pipeline, it will still follow the same route. So it again, I guess branching, what the way you put it, Matan, like branching out later on, this is exactly what what I have in my mind as well in terms of mental picture of this. So
Hmm.
And
I
this
think
means
it's a good idea.
I didn't even realize. So what's great, what's even better right now actually is that so before I was trying to piece together all of the different
Mhm.
data sets from Kaggle. So the chord plus the metadata that some other guys' notebooks were creating. But this is already being done in Christine's notebook. So beautiful. Um,
Mhm.
so to me, I don't know. I mean, okay, I'm in a much better place. I think we just use this as our starting point. And then
Mhm.
we start recording in maybe like Miro or something, just the different ideas for the next step or um, how to do something, and then like our next meeting we can talk about the graph and where to go next.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think it'll be great if you, Matan, essentially start that initial
Okay.
graph,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Essentially, like what you understand about
Right.
this, and then um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
because right now, for example, like in my head, first of all, I have totally different graph, and I see it as a subgraph of like the whole CoronaWhy, like all of this different stuff. So,
Okay.
I definitely have a mess in my head regarding this. But the moment when we can project it on this literature view, I'm like, oh, everything makes sense. Now, I have a feeling that Alex, you have really like your mental picture of this again comes from the code itself. So I think you will be, I mean, you're already in a good spot in terms of understanding it, and then you have some mental structure to attach to. So if I
Hmm.
think it'll be like really great to see this process. Matan creates this pipeline, what he sees currently, right? Then Alex, you can kind of fix, things that like
Yeah.
essentially you'll be able to identify kind of this, not the miscommunication, what's the right term over here? Just kind of like this uncertainties, and then I will also, on top of this, when I see some pieces, I will see much better, clear picture from this overall perspective of CoronaWhy. For example, like where Elasticsearch is a good spot to be. Because right now, I guess this Christine's pipeline, essentially, this end-to-end pipeline in itself already. So in a sense, what we take, it's not only stage two, right? It's the whole pipeline. We just now need to identify again, like this, our previous notion of, okay, this is pre-processing step. All of the pre-processing results essentially end up in Elasticsearch. And then the rest
Hmm.
is in the rest pod, etc. So kind of like, I think it'll be really good, very simple process. We start from the really simple. So again, the pipeline that Matan you're trying to draw, I would expect it to be like linear, something very simple.
Yes. Yeah.
No branching, nothing. Very stuff like, okay, data goes from here. It's a journey of one document from Core 19 all the way to item. The thing is, we don't even need to definitely to stick to Mike Honey's work, because
Right.
I know that UX UI people right now have their own timeline in terms of from user perspective what they need to do. So we will need to connect our pipeline in that direction, not Mike Honey. Mike Honey will be great to kind of see that how it all ended up where and how we visualize it already today or yesterday, right? But now we simplify everything, cut all of the fat, trim
Yeah.
all of the fat from the pipeline, and then we'll add all of those pieces back the moment when we understand why we're adding them back. So I think that will be the best. I mean, that's what Matan was proposing from initially, and I'm just
Yeah,
reiterating with
I
my
think it's
words.
good.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll get something started, and then you guys pick it apart, add stuff, whatever.
Okay.
And I guess my last question: have the UX UI people done anything or documented anything? I know I saw
So
like. Go ahead.
And
I
sorry, guys, Anton, I'm gonna let you answer that if you can. I just have to jump off for another meeting at
okay.
11:30 here.
Okay.
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 Yeah. Thanks for your time,
Sorry,
Alex.
guys.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.
Thanks.